Big Daddy Matt, you did say that you were going to sing at the start of this.
Hello. Yeah, I'm not gonna really.
Hello and welcome to In the Pocket, the bass guitar podcast where we get the lowdown on the low end. My name's Johnny, a totally average bass player, and each week I'm lucky to be joined by a different co-host to talk all about that bass. Now, I haven't said that for a while because it's just been me and my boy Chris, who is there in the background now. He's giving me a thumbs up, but you don't want to see that. That's why we don't do video, honestly, so we don't have to put up with Chris's face. But this week, as well as being joined by friend and full-time session bass player Chris Horrocks, we are also joined by session player, bass teacher, and lovely low-end lad for Whalebone and, I hope I'm saying it right, Alucard?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yes!
You play bass in Yellow Card?
Yeah.
Go on.
I wish. I want to play the violin in Yellow Card.
Yeah. I wish I had that. I wish I had that yellow card money.
This is our first ever three-way that we've done on this podcast. So I don't know who to start with. Matt, how are you?
Oh, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
Excellent. Oh, that's quite all right, young man. Yes, I am. I called you young man.
I'm pretty sure I'm probably the oldest here.
I'm good, thanks. And Chris, you right?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Fine. Awesome. Cool, nice. So every time we have a very special guest on this podcast, we like to ask them three different questions to kind of get you guys to know them a little bit more, to break that wall down so you guys, just get the vibe a little bit more. So, and if you guys want to kind of hear mine and Chris's answers to this, you can go back and hear the previous episodes when we first appeared on this podcast, so go back and have a listen. But Matt, I want to start things off. Tell the people how and why you started playing bass.
Okay, so I actually started off as a guitar player, like a lot of us do. And then I moved to Brighton and I was looking to get into the local gigging scene, and there's a website called Join My Band. So I put out an ad saying, guitar player moved to Brighton, looking to gig, and people were literally sending me like hate messages like get to the back of the bleeping queue and all of these things, and I was like, okay,
what?
That's not the vibe I was hoping for.
Thanks,
and
Brighton.
it was around Christmas time, and I got a bit of cash, and I thought, right, I'm going to buy a bass. So I bought a bass, and I was gigging a month later. So
wow,
yeah. So but I've always
Wow.
been with guitar. I was always a rhythm player, and I didn't care about shredding at all. And when I picked up bass, I was like, this is where I should have been the whole time, because obviously it's so rhythm based, and it's just keeping the backbeat going. So since then I've not really touched the guitar at all, and obviously been playing bass for years and years and years now. So yeah, but that's basically how I got into it. But I've been playing guitar since I was about 8, I guess. So I've been on strings a long old time.
Amazing. And you're teaching, doing session work in studio and live, isn't it now?
Yeah. So I do up to 100 gigs a year live with various either I'm in quite an established function band, and then I do quite a lot of dep work. And then I do a bit of session work for various people, and then I've got my own projects as well. So yeah, I'm pretty busy really. I'm quite lucky in that way. And then I do a bit of like online teaching and stuff like that. More technique based these days. So for people who want to learn like a specific thing, like double thumbing or hybrid picking or something like that, it's quite a lot of like metal and proggy techniques really.
Well, I need to know all those things, so we'll talk later.
I'll give you
Thank you.
I'll give you mates rates, mate. Don't worry.
Oh, sweet. Thanks so much. Like we say, we all stem down whether we want to admit it or not from being a guitarist at first, which just goes to show that us bass players, there deserves to be more of us out there, I think. So I wonder if you could start also by saying your 3 words to describe your bass playing.
Yeah, this one was quite difficult because I always find it's really difficult to speak about your own playing and try and be like, you don't want to sound massively big-headed or like, it's just so awkward, isn't it? But I think
really fucking sick.
Yeah, I'm just fucking dope. I was gonna say a couple of people have always said that I'm like really precise with my right hand. So from a picking perspective, generally I try and be very linear. So like I try and get from a recording perspective, I'm trying to get every note to hit the same like velocity. And, you know, just kind of hitting the same way, really. And I try and be quite efficient as well. So that's probably, I'd go precise, efficient. I don't want to waste any energy. So with double thumbing and stuff, I'm keeping my hand really close to the strings. Don't want to go any excess movement because you're just going to get a bit more fatigue. And then I'd like to say varied as well. On the gram and stuff like that, I do quite a lot of metal stuff. But actually, from a session perspective, I do quite a lot of like neo soul and like funk stuff as well, which I don't generally tend to put as much up online. But yeah, I try and keep my toes wet in that world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I was kind of looking over all your stuff, I wasn't expecting like how much metal there was, and I was like, you know, obviously very secretly, happily surprised. I was like, oh yes, so good. And you know, for those that haven't, what's your handle on Instagram for people to go and check you out?
It's just Matt Parker Bass. Nice and easy.
There you go.
Or you can go on
Yeah,
mattparkerbass.com if you want.
Ooh.
There we go.
Or Matt Parker Bass on
Wow.
TikTok. I'm on TikTok now, baby.
Have you got a website, or is it just a link tree?
No, it's a proper website. You can go and have a look.
Oh,
There's a contact form and everything.
I feel like
Wow,
I should
wait,
get a
do you get
website.
much? Do you get much through the website?
I get quite a few inquiries. I don't actually know what my traffic numbers are anymore because I've not looked in a million years. But I was probably getting maybe, trying to think, maybe 200, 300 clicks a month, which is all right. I don't promote it anyway, so I don't do any like Google.
I think that's
ads or
pretty.
anything.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was all right.
That's pretty good. Oh, nice. Well, there you
Yeah,
go.
there you go.
JohnnyDibble.com coming soon then.
Yeah, make it happen.
So finish things off with our top 3 quick fire questions. What now? I know this is probably gonna be. This might be hard, or you might have one in your head straight away. Because I know you have an incredible bass collection. So, what is your number one bass?
My number one bass is the Squier Bass 6. No, it's not. We'll get onto that in a minute, but no, my number one bass is my new...
This has just died.
He's fuming. That's literally why, that's the only reason I'm on this podcast, just to get the bass 6 in there for Chris. No, my number one right now is my new Voronsaku MP Shorty 5. So, it's a kind of a design collaboration between me and Saku Viori from Voronsaku Guitars. It's a bit of an interesting one. It's a short scale 5-string with Thunderbird pickups, and it's an offset body, so it's kind of hitting all kinds of niches. But yeah, that's my baby at the moment, obviously, because I kind of designed every spec of it in terms of what I needed.
Hitting every kind of kink there is. That sounds insane, looks insane, and we will actually have a little listen to that later on. Spoiler alert, everyone, because it sounds damn good. Chris, should we move on to some questions?
Oh, go on then. Question 1. There we go. This is a really good question, actually. Like, I'm pretty keen on this to discuss this. So this is, do I really need a preamp with an active bass, such as a Ray 34? Now, who would like to go first in answering this? On your buzzers.
So is this kind of, we're talking preamp pedals with combined with active basses? We're talking about.
I'm assuming. My assumption is yes. Like, do I need some sort of preamp pedal with an active bass? Or is this... Because originally when I first read this, I thought, do I really need a preamp with an active bass? Well, it's an active bass. But then again, you can buy active basses where you can't control the preamp. My Squier Jazz bass has EMGs in it, and there's no preamp control. It's just the EMG thing in it, and you can still do the volumes and the tones, but you can't do, say, something like you can do on a Stingray, for example. You know, you can do bass mid treble. So I'm going to go ahead and assume it's some sort of like, do I need a preamp pedal? Like they're going into something like the Dark Glass harmonic booster, maybe the Sans amp, and then they're coming into an active bass.
Yeah, it's a question I get quite a lot on like active bass, or if I'm demoing like a preamp or something, someone will be like, yeah, but I've got a preamp. Or actually, I know the main source of this comments because I think my top video is like the top 5 pedals every bass player needs. And in there, I put a preamp because I love preamps, preamp pedals. And loads of the comments are like, well, you don't need that because I've got one in my bass already, etc. For me, like, I really like having a consistent sound and having my sound kind of built into my pedal board that I can take with me, because I'd sometimes be at occasions where I don't know what amp I'm using, or I don't know what the cab's going to be like, and so I like to kind of keep as much tone as possible in my bass and board rather than the amp. That's kind of where my passion goes. It goes bass, pedals, then the amp. So I'm all for having a preamp generally, but then as well as having it on there, and it's something that I will tweak as well. Whereas often, if I've got an active bass, I will find the sound I want and leave it. I'm rarely like massively tweaking it. I mean, I don't love complicated preamps on basses. I'll just have a bass, middle, and treble, please.
Yeah.
Maybe some kind of like series parallel thing, but not too crazy, because that's when it gets into danger zone, I think, because then you've got like that treble to fiddle with, on the board, and then the treble on the amp as well. You've got, and what do? You could be there twiddling for ages, and I think that can sometimes take things out a little bit. So I guess the answer is it depends for me, but I'm overall in the camp of having a preamp pedal as well as, regardless of what the bass is like.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And I think one of the things that can make your life a lot easier as well is that if you've got a good preamp, you can run a reduced gig rig. So if you want to DI out into a PA, it gives you a lot more versatility in terms of the sound going out to the desk. So you have a little bit of control over that. And then I also think that a lot of good preamps now have things like compressors. So it helps just make the sound a bit more balanced overall in terms of the output. And I think as well that if you are going to have you get drive on these preamps now a lot of the time as well. So really from a reduced gig rig, they're really good. Can make your life a lot easier, and they can give you a template for going out to the front of house, which you're happy with before the sound guy gets his hand on your signal. So I think they're useful from that point of view. I think from a signaling point of view as well, I think that I would prefer to have the bass flat if possible, and to kind of sculpt my tone from the pedal rather than... I'm not a huge fan of active basses, to be honest. All my basses, apart from one, are passive. And even then, I try and make the one active as kind of passive sounding as possible. So everything is just at 12 o'clock flat in the middle of the notch. But I think that, there's so many benefits to having a preamp pedal that really... it's just something that everyone should have on their board now. Again, helps you get a more linear signal, can reduce the stuff that you need to take to a gig, especially if you're not going to have any stage sound. And I know this is something that us three have spoken about before, not on the podcast, but from a point of view of making it easier for people to mix in your sound into in-ears and stuff like that, if you've not got any stage sound, so you've not got a live amp on stage, it just helps your sound guy balance everyone's output, rather than him trying to fight half of your sound coming off the amp and then half of it coming out of your, preamp or something like that. So I think if you can do that and maybe not have a live stage, it can make things a little bit easier for your sound guy as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Chris, what say you?
I think you're both right. Absolutely. The main thing that resonates for me is I think there's certainly nothing wrong with having a preamp pedal or some sort of preamp alongside an active bass. So the main reason I enjoy that, though, is I try to have a very consistent tone in the pedal department. So, for example, my live preset on the Quad Cortex never changes. That I pretty much don't do anything with that, because when I bring a different bass guitar into that environment, I want that to be the big change. So for whether it's my passive Godan, which is a PJ, or my Music Man, which is like an active Stingray, I think they're kind of like the two biggest differences I've got. I want, when I plug those two basses in, to go, oh yeah, this is a completely different sound. There's a reason why I brought this bass. And then I will maybe tweak it on the bass a little bit for that particular gig, because I'm going for that specific sound. So, for example, on maybe like a blues gig, again, it will still be the same Quad Cortex preset, which essentially is a compressor into a Mesa Boogie 400 Plus and then an 810, and then off it goes. But then I'll bring the passive go down on the P pickup with the tone down, and I'm like, right, it's Pinot time. You know, like this is kind of like the bluesy, kind of much more mellow sound. And then for say the more recent gigs I've been doing, which is kind of like that big corporate kind of like very bright sound, like very poppy, but still with like quite a lot of treble, like a lot more treble than I thought I was originally going to go for. I'm very much going for a stereotypical active bass sound. Stingray, the treble's up a little bit, the bass is up a little bit, it's a bit more scooped, but the preamp stays the same. So the preamp is still doing a lot of heavy lifting. I'm just bringing in the bass as kind of like a bit of seasoning. But you are right, though. Having a preamp is going to decrease your gig load significantly, which if you're doing lots of gigs and lots of driving, lots of late nights, if you've ever dragged an 8x10 up a flight of stairs at 2 o'clock in the morning, I guarantee to you will be buying a preamp pedal that next week. You'll never want to do it again.
I think as well,
for me, that.
I think as well for something like a Ray 34, Stingrays have quite a specific sound, don't they? And even though you can tweak EQs on a Ray, I think it still very much sounds intrinsically like a Ray, but with some part of the frequency boosted. You know what I mean? They've got such a characteristic like growly sound, haven't they? That I think it's actually quite useful probably to have a preamp for something like a Stingray, because it helps you kind of start on a more almost like a neutral setting, if that makes sense. You can add so much more, and as well a lot of preamps will operate in different frequencies to the preamp on your bass as well. So for example, I use the Walrus Badwater a lot as my preamp, and it's got like low pass filtering, high pass filtering. I can tweak the low mids, the high mids, treble, bass. I've got a couple of different like bass response switches on there and stuff like that. And then I've got a compressor. So it just helps me, certainly with that kind of bass, it probably allows me to add a little bit finer detailing into the signal that the front of house is getting. And if you want that kind of character, that's perfect. But also if you've got one bass, or, you've literally got one bass to take to a gig and that's your working instrument, it probably just helps you tweak either the sound coming out of a PA, which might be unusual to you, like a different PA every night, or it just helps you like sculpt the tone to be slightly better for whatever the application is. So if you want something like more Motown, you can add like a load more low end in, cut some of the mids out, cut some of the treble out, like lower the gain and things like that. That's just coming out of the bass and just help to make it a bit more mellow sounding.
That's such a good point, especially that bit. I was just about to mention like the creative options that come to you when you have more preamps available to you. Like with the Stingray, it's just bass, mid, and treble, but depending on the song, if something's a little bit more vintage, I can maybe leave the bass at 12, maybe leave the treble at 12, and then smack the mids up really high and get that really like honky tone, which kind of suits really well. And then when the more contemporary kind of rock stuff shows up, bring the bass and the treble up, bring the mid back down to 12, and it's very scooped and very bright. And that's just on the bass. But on a preamp pedal like your Badwater, for example, you've got more knobs to play with, Matt, is what I'm saying here. So you can mess with those more fundamental frequencies and mess with the filtering, and you can really horn it down from gig to gig. So I think that's very useful. And also, let's be honest, if you're not one of those people who wants to go, okay, this is a Motown gig, I'm going to do this. This is a pop gig, I'm going to do this. Just set it to where it sounds nice once, then go, okay, yeah, I'll just leave it here. This is fine. So you can be as picky as you want.
And that's it. And with the preamp pedal as well, you don't have to have it on all the time. So if there's a certain part of the signal that you want, you can just level them so they sound at the same volume. You can go front of house, part for half the gig through it, just bypass the preamp essentially, and then turn it on when you want that like scooped sound, or you want that like super trebly sound, or really bass boosted, whatever you want. So again, it allows you to have like a one-stop shop almost for a particular part of the set, or a song in particular that you don't want to be starting to mess with your bass settings whilst you're trying to start a song and all of these things. Just like it lets you to kind of get on with the song, and you just press one button and it gives you that sound that you need.
It's often more of a visual cue as well, because when you're looking at a pedal, you can see up bass, or up treble, or whereas on the bass, sometimes if I'm looking down, I'm like, I especially on a Stingray, I can never remember. I know where the mid is because it's in the middle. The bass and the treble, I always get them mixed up, which end they're on, and I'm like, and you can't see it always. If it's just like a whole chrome knob, you can't always see where it's at. So often, if you're trying to do things quickly, it's easiest to just have it on your board ready to go.
Yeah, 100%. And they're not always the same. Like I've got my active bass doesn't have like the stereotypical kind of onboard EQ settings that you'd expect. So it's got like some of the controls are stacked, and then it has like a blend where you'd expect bass to be and stuff like that. So you like sometimes on the fly, you sometimes on the fly you're thinking, I'm going to tweak the bass up a little bit, and actually I'm just going towards the jazz, bridge pickup, and I'm thinking, this is the opposite of what I wanted.
I've never
what
gigged
bass
with
is that?
Yeah, what bass is that?
That's the ESP Horizon that I've got. Scumbag ESP. No, it's my really, really nice ESP Horizon custom 5-string, which is killer bass. But it's one of those things, because I'm a big passive guy, I generally tend to gravitate towards one of my passive basses more, which is a real shame, because from a playing perspective, it's actually one of my best players. Might actually gut the preamp of it at some point, but it's just that thing of it's not the easiest one to use on the fly, and because it's so blacked out as well, all the knobs are black as well, and there's no real like indent the indent is just a little dot that's been like kind of grooved into the knob. So on a dark stage, you just don't know where you are at all. You're like, am I blended here? Am I like on where am I on this?
Yeah. I've never gigged with a bass that has lots of active options. I only own one. I mean, I own 3 active basses, but only gig with the Stingray, and that's just bass, middle, and treble. And I can remember what order they're in, and I don't really touch them that often. But yeah, having something like that Ibanez SRM thingy that I tried out a few years ago, that had something like a blend, a volume, a tone, but the tone only worked when it was in a passive mode.
Yeah, I've had one.
Bass, mid, treble, and then a mid-frequency sweep on-off switch. Those are that's a lot of things to remember when you're on a dark stage covered in sweat, and then going, oh wait, what's this? And then you're just messing with the tone control. That's not even active anyway.
It's like some of the Dingwalls that I've played. Like they've got like a rotary switch for the pickup selector, and Canadian ones are better, but the import ones you don't always know unless you're listening out for it. You don't quite know which pickup you're on, and then you've got like you can have the EQ, and then you've got volume, and then with some of the Canadian ones as well, you can do like passive series and parallel switching, and then you've got passive switches and all these things, and you end up with like 3 or 4 switches, and then like a rack of knobs for like high mid, low mid, because there's so many different preamps you can put in them as well. So sometimes you've got like 6 knobs. You can have a 6-way selector for the pickups, and then you've got all this. It just ends up becoming. I end up just putting on one position and just putting on passive mode, because I'm like, I just don't want to deal with the hassle of trying to like tweak this EQ to make something good. I'm just going to get one setting and make sure that works for like 90% of what I need.
A rack of knobs. That sounds like one hell of a barbecue.
God, to have
that was my nickname in college.
To have 6 knobs. Oh my god!
Imagine. Amazing. Well, I think we've done a above and beyond answer on that one. I think that's great. For me, I think overall we're on team preamp pedal. I think.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Nothing
passive,
wrong with that.
active or not, just do what you want, innit? Don't let us tell you what to do, but definitely do that. Let's move on to the next section. Every flipping time, I haven't got any paper to rustle. I've got
a Star Wars Christmas card.
Welcome to the news. It's time for the news. Now I kind of predicted that it was going to get a little news light leading up to Christmas, as I don't know. It's weird that lots of people launch things around Christmas, but actually instruments probably not the Christmas market. Maybe, I don't know. But we have had a few releases. So we'll start things off over at Fender. So Fender have released a new finish for the American Ultra, just the P bass though. And we're 3 British boys, and this is going to upset us because this one is only a US exclusive for Guitar Center. So obviously we don't have Guitar Center over here, which is very sad. But, bit like sometimes Andertons will do special colours of Squires and things like that. They've done a special run for Guitar Center for the new Umbra Burst. Does that mean anything to either of you?
Umbro Burst. Nice.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean anything to me. What does that mean?
What? I don't know.
No, I have no idea what that means. I mean, it looks really nice. I really like it. It looks lovely.
It's basically like a insane flame, like almost like a translucent flame body, and then like it's on fire almost, like a red burst around the outside. I've never seen one like it before, to be fair. And then I think it's all with black pick guards, chrome hardware, and then a black matching headstock, which is really cool. The American Ultra, is their some of the top end vendors that isn't custom shop that you're getting. So I think it's cool that they've brought out in some new colors. They are, like, in dollars, it is $2,800, which is quite a lot. And again, you're getting all this active preamp stuff on there that you're doing, but a modern D profile neck as well. I assume that all these specs are standard to the normal ones. It is just a different finish, but they've done it across the Strat, 2 Strats, and a Telly as well. So there we go. Thanks Fender. I mean, thanks a lot, Fender, for not giving it to us. There we go. Second up, we have 2 new signature models. The first of which being from our friends at Music Man. They brought out a Stingray for Mike Herrera. Are you guys familiar with Mike Herrera at all?
Yeah, I am.
I feel like I am, but I can't think where I know him from.
So he is the bass player for MXPX. So he is a pretty much always playing with a pick kind of guy, punk rock, and yeah, just right up I can hear that tone now. Traditionally, he often has his Stingrays passive, though, interestingly, which you'd think that would take away that signature Stingray sound. Maybe he's running a preamp pedal, though. I don't know. And yeah, what he's released, it's kind of what we've seen him using over the last couple of years. It is a seafoam green Stingray with like the weird band logo, like the head on the pick guard, and then with a matching headstock as well, with a maple neck. And then they've also got like a matte black version as well. How many do you think they've limited the run to of the matte black version? How many would it be a sensible number?
Oh, yeah, the sensible number. I reckon they've done something silly like 31.
Matt, what do you think?
I'm going to say 100.
10.
What?
There are 10.
Oh, I love it.
You know what's really good about this? You know what's really... And I say this with love, because I love Stingrays so much. Like, Tim Comerford is one of my favourite bass players by far.
Oh, here we go.
This bass is just over £2,200, and it's got dummy knobs on it.
What?
The knobs don't work.
Oh, of course. Oh, because it's... Do you know what? I wondered about that.
It's dummy knobs.
Because it's passive.
Yeah.
So is there not even
this bass looks
like
cool,
a volume and a tone on it, though?
It says here, having the appearance of a traditional 2-band EQ Stingray, the Herrera Stingray's pickup is actually wired straight to the jack with 3 dummy knobs. So
Wow,
not even a
right.
volume.
What are they doing at the moment with all these like
Oh,
1
I know what
and
they've done.
0
Guys, I know what they've done. Don't worry, I fixed it. It's a collaboration with Dark Glass, and all of the controls are on the back.
Open up that cavity. There you go. There it all is.
Yeah, it's just a trim pot.
It's just a trim pot, mate. That you need a specific.
Sorry, let me. Oh, it's too loud.
Sorry,
hang on.
Yeah, it's too loud. Let me just disassemble my entire pedal board. No, we did this last week. Let's stop.
Yeah. Yeah. It's now. I kind of get it. Like, it's a cool thing. Like, yeah, I never use it, so why would I bother? And for a signature model, yeah, you're gonna design what you use. But for like a production model, is that any use to anybody? I wonder why they bother making them for people to buy. If number one, obviously they're so inaccessible because they make 10, and they cost like $3,000, and then 2 if they're just not really going to be usable to 90% of.
I wonder if they're going to
I'm not saying
be
that.
like a launch edition where it's like, here's 10. These are like, you know, the Boy Roy, exactly how Mike would have it, and then, you know, they do like a limited run of say like 200 or something where they're like, yeah, it's just the right color and it looks the same, but actually it's a proper Stingray.
Yeah, that would make sense, but it doesn't seem like there's any kind of indication that they're doing that.
It also takes 4 months to get to you, just so you know. Also, though, just regarding the dummy knobs, yeah, I think it's a bit silly because I remember when I was a teenager, ESP brought out the James Hetfield Truckster Les Paul shaped single cut like guitar, and that had what looked like to be 2 pickup selectors. One was like a Les Paul one, and then one was at the bottom, and one of them was a dummy one. But instead of having, because James Hetfield just said he never used the net pickup, but they still put it in, and they built another pickup selector on the bass. So it still was a usable guitar to someone who wanted to have access to a net pickup. But James was like, well, I'm never going to use it, so let's just leave it on the production model anyway. And I imagine they probably got the tech to, like, you know, de-wire it, for example. But that seems like a sensible thing to do. But dummy pots just seems like, I don't know, unless you're a really big fan of like Mike's playing and you want super authentic, that's cool. But I think if I bought something like a Stingray, I mean, the active preamp on my Stingray is like one of my favorite things about the bass. It changes so much of the bass for me. So buying something like this that then doesn't have access to it, I'd be like, oh, great. And it's not cheap either, let's be honest.
No. Well, I'm sorry to say, it's the black one is sold out, Chris, so you won't be getting one anytime soon.
Well, I'm not surprised. They only made 10 of them. Mike probably
and
bought
they're
all 10
coming
of them.
to me. Yeah, Mike's probably got all 10 of them.
Can you imagine? Yeah, he just gave one to like his postman, the guy he gets eggs from. I don't know.
He's going to do a rig rundown, you know, where they're like, oh, what are you taking on this tour? And he's like, I've got 10 of these.
Yeah, I've got. Premier guitar.
They're all tuned to semitone different. But,
actually, that wouldn't happen because I've noticed recently Premier Guitar have like stopped doing rig rundowns for bass players, and it's really, really boiled my blood.
I know. So, but then sometimes they'll do a combined one with a guitarist, and I'm like, oh, please, and I'll like skip through the video and be like,
No, you get 3 minutes at the end, whereas tech shows you a P bass.
Yeah, it's just a P bass and a Sans amp.
Just go straight in. That's it, really.
No, they just did one with what's the guitarist of Foo Fighters calls it? Chris Shiflett. I think it's him, and they didn't do anyone else. It was just him, and it was a good video to be fair. But they've just done one with Corey and Matt Heafy from Trivium, and I was like, oh, buzzing. Right, okay. I want to see Paolo's bass rig because I've seen Trivium live, and every time I've seen them live, either at a festival or their own gig, I've gone, that bass sounds amazing. And guess what? They've just not interviewed him.
It really bugs me on those. And I know it's, it's probably a scheduling thing, and I hate it when the techs do it, and like,
I hate it.
It's
yeah.
Eric Clapton's one,
I love it,
something like that. Like, really?
Yeah, because they're so like, fair enough. You're playing, say, like, one of us had a rig rundown. You're playing the bass for like, say, an hour a night. Your tech is there 5 hours of the day, or going through all your gear, making sure backline's proper.
But yes, to Matt, because there is a Premier Guitar rundown with the Edge's guitar tech, and it's amazing because the guy clearly knows everything. He knows the rig inside, outside, and back to front. It's amazing. Same
the
point,
Meshuggah one.
I haven't seen the Meshuggah one, but there's a one with Sinister Gates from Avenged Sevenfold, and the guy is obviously a great guitar tech, but someone else built the rig, and he doesn't know anything about it. And at one point, he makes some weird throwaway comment about how, like, just go on, like, a quip board or something like that to see what he's using. And I'm like, this is your job!
I totally know what you mean, because It's the middle ground that I hate, when the artist is there doing it, and then every question they're going, I don't know.
Oh, that's bad too, yeah.
And then they have to come in and be like, it's a jazz bass, and they're like, oh,
it's a bass.
You know, they have no idea.
Oh, yeah,
about any, like even the simplest things. They're like,
I want the one.
I don't know what strings these are.
I want the one where it's like it's the artist, and it's almost like you can tell they've sat in a garage with the guitar tech for 6 weeks, going, "Do I want a boost at 2.8K or 2.9K?" You know, like proper. Like, I want it to be like, I want to back out of it because it's too nerdy. I want to be the one to like sort of like do the safe word and tap out.
Matt's like, that's my realm. Baby.
I think part of it though is that we're all gear nerds, so we're like, oh, I want to know what strings you're using, I want to know what pickups you got, blah blah blah. Like some people are just tools, you know what I mean? Not people, but some people are just tools. Like that guy who was trolling you in the chat the other night.
Yeah, right.
No, but some people, like, you know, for them it's like any bass is just a way for me to make sound. And so, like, I don't really care. It's like, it does the job of me being able to play these root notes under a guitar player. And some people are like, this is the embodiment of me being creative. So, like, or some people just like collecting stuff. So, you know, for us three, it's easy for us to go, yeah, I want this because I want to know all the ins and outs, because for us it's interesting. But we're not looking at it from like a tool perspective. We're looking at it from just being like, you know, gear whores, essentially. So I think there's...
I'll take that title.
Yeah,
you'll have to take it off me.
You're definitely right though, because there are musicians out there who will, you know, if you treat it from like a tradesman perspective, there are tradesmen out there who just goes, this is a screwdriver, this is a hammer, that's it. And then there'll be other people who go, this is a aluminium screwdriver with a blah 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 tone pump preamp. It's got this, and I'm running this screwdriver into archetype nollie and all that kind of stuff. So I guess I mean there are going to be musicians out there, like big musicians, you know, like arena touring bands who are just like, and that's literally it. But then you're also going to get those ones who are like, this band has been around for 30 years, and I've spent 30 years every night going up to the front of house engineer and going, give me the recording of the bass, and I was trying a new pedal out. I need to know what it was like. I mean, that would be me, which is probably why every sound guy I gig with hates me. Because I'm like, how did the bass sound? Because I decided to boost the mids on this one. And they're like, mate, you were soloed. No, you were muted the entire time.
Yeah, they were like, I don't know.
You were a backing track, buddy.
Yeah, a dream. Don't get paid though, right?
You get paid?
Just a body on a stage.
Yeah. Wait, you guys are getting paid?
What? I'm doing it wrong.
So, moving on to our third bit of news. We have another signature bass from Charvel. I don't think we've ever featured Charvel on the show. I played my first Charvel like a couple of weeks ago, and it was fine. This is the that's a really good setup for this
great endorsement of Charvel.
Yeah, can't wait for this.
It was distinctly in the middle of the road average. It was unmemorable.
The one singular time I've played the bass in that company, I've just plastered that across all of them. They're fine. So this one, hopefully it's a lot better than that one. Is the Frank Bello signature Pro Mod SoCal Bass PJ4. It's Frank Bello from Anthrax. It's his signature PJ bass, essentially. It looks a bit like they've gone with that telly bass look with the pick guard that goes all up the two horns, but with a P. It's like a modern version of that, I'd say, mixed with a Geddy Lee jazz bass with your and I love that look. High mass bridge on there. Block inlays, black body, although it is a mirror pick guard instead of a white one.
Is it?
And then it's super classy looking. I think when you think Charvel, you might instantly think like, I don't know, like I think of 80s hair metal for some reason.
Yeah, it's that vibe, isn't it?
When you look at their guitars, they're quite loud, a lot of them. But then we've got the San Dimas ones now from the basses as well, which are a bit more tame. In fact, I'm just looking at their website now. The basses are actually very tame. apart from one of the colours. But they're like more traditional. And this is actually they only do 3 other bases and then Frank Bello's signature one. So I think that's quite interesting.
I love this. I love
everything. I just want to say I love this.
I love everything about this bass, genuinely. Like, Frank Bello is one of my favourite bassists. I love how this bass is kind of like for me, when I saw it, I know you said Geddy Lee, which I think is a bang on comparison, because it's got that maple neck with the block inlays, and it's kind of like a little bit of a jazz styling slightly. I know the body's a bit more P-shaped, but this reminds me more of like Phil Lynott from Thin Lizzy.
I was going to say Phil Lynott.
Yeah, the mirror pick guards. And I know a little bit about what the Frank Bello signature P pickups are based on. So they're based on the standard EMG PJ set, which I own, but I believe they've just trebled them up a little bit more. And I love those pickups. They're in my Eurodyne, and they used to be in the Godan. And I only took them out the Godan because I didn't need the Godan to be like a hot contemporary rock. I wanted it to be a bit more vintage. But yeah, this is great. Like, I really like Frank Bello. It's one of my favorite bass players. I think it's a good price as well. It's $1,300, so I think that's about £1,100.
It's because they're saving you some money for a preamp pedal because you've got no tone scoping.
There we go. Well, yeah, because there's a lot of all my basses that have EMG pickups in it active don't have sculpting options on the bass. It's like they do something to it, and then you get the option to do the tone like a passive bass, which is, there's certainly advantages and disadvantages to it, for sure.
Well, it's just like giving it its own sound,
It's just some oomph. Way. Yeah. We'll move on to you, Matt. But in short, I think I love it. 10 out of 10 for me. I would really like to try one.
Ooh, that's a big score.
Wow. Okay, wait, hang on. 10 out of 10 is a bit harsh.
I just shit
8.5 out of 10.
8.5. That's
nice.
A good score still.
I would absolutely love to try one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I want to try every bass. That's the thing. Like, you can show me like a Squier, like Affinity Squier, jazz bass or something like that. Yeah, I'll try it. But this is definitely a vibe. And like the only criticism I have of this is that it doesn't have any tone control, so it's just 2 volumes. And bridge and P middle and a jazz bridge are definitely a vibe with just 2 volumes, because I had a 66 Mustang with that setup and it was phenomenal. But as a do-it-all workhorse, I would have liked the tone control on this, just because I think the PJ setup is so intrinsic to like any good kind of covers function setup, or just like as a general workhorse that will do any recording session you realistically need. And I would have just liked that tone to be able to take some of that treble out if it needs it. I know you're not buying this bass necessarily for that, and you probably are playing kind of like heavier genres where you're really just having your tone wide open anyway. But I think just from a versatility point of view for people buying it, it would have been a good choice just to put a tone cap in there somewhere.
Yeah, and like, it's interesting, isn't it? Because what's their aim when they put out a signature model for someone? Because they want to sell these, and that's going to be a big point. That's going to put a lot of people off. I would have thought. I'm going back and forth with this because I say that, but like you said, a lot of people are probably going to be into Anthrax and going to be playing thrash metal.
See, I think
using this, so maybe the target audience is, it's correct to not have the tone on there, but you're potentially alienating people. I mean, they're not going to be upset if it is on there, I suppose my point is.
Yeah, because you don't need to use it, and I think for $899, this isn't really aesthetically pleasing, like nice looking, good PJ bass. And I think that there are going to be people who aren't into Anthrax and look at that and go, that looks awesome, that's going to look great on stage with a mirror pick guard, I love the block inlays. Oh no, it doesn't have a tone, I'm not going to be able to play whatever dubby song, or I'm not going to be able to play Angel by Shaggy at the local boozer. So I think that is going to be like a bit of a it's kind of, they've shot themselves in the foot at the audience, because again, at that price range, you're into Mexi P money and stuff like that. You're not into, you might get a second-hand US Fender for that, or like a MIJ one or something like that. But you're not really into new Fender US money yet. You are kind of in that like mid-tier Fender price bracket. And I think that could have been a real competitor for, say, something like a Players Series, P-Bass, or, PJ or something like that. And I just think that actually the Fenders are probably a little bit more versatile.
Well, this is why, and like signature basses is a whole topic in of itself. But that's why I really think that I want to see more affordable signature models. And I think it was, I'm sure I've spoken about this before, but I remember Pete Wentz doing an interview, and they were like, "Oh, why Squier?" And he was like, "I want kids to be able to like pick up and play, and like have a good bass endorsed by someone that they, that my fan base can go and get one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just have it be this insane custom shop thing that nobody can afford." And that's something I miss. I want them to do more of that, because that's the whole ethos, or at least I would want to do. But I suppose, it's a different way of thinking about it, really. It depends what you want to get out of it. And this one sits in the middle of that price range, doesn't it? Where it's I think it's a really fair
It's not
price.
an Obtainium, exactly. It's not $5,000 or, $4,000 or whatever it's going to be. And going back to what you're saying about Squier as well, Squier had that kind of era in the like noughties where they were just churning out some absolutely killer Sig basses. The Mikey Way Metal Flake Mustang is one of my all-time favorite Sig basses, because it just looks if anyone hasn't seen it, please Google it. But it's a massive flake silver Mustang short scale with a massive like bass like mudbucker thing in the middle, and then it's got a comp stripe as well, which is just like my all-time favorite thing on a bass. So like it's just the coolest Sig bass, and like they only made them for like a year or two, and then they just have disappeared, and they're so hard to find now. And again, go back to what you're saying, the Pete Wentz P, that was a killer one as well. There was another really good P one. I can't remember whose Sig it is. It's a white one.
Mike Dunn did one.
Mike Dunn did one as well. But no, I'm thinking of like, it's like a white P, and I think it's got a black pick guard. I can't remember whose one it was. It looked very Ramonesy, but it wasn't. I can't remember whose thing it was.
Yeah, I'm thinking of it too, and I can't think who it was.
I know Matt Freeman.
Oh yeah, Matt Freeman. Yeah,
had one.
Yeah, it might
like
be the Matt Freeman one. Yeah, I think it is.
And
the
everybody
Matt Freeman
raves about that one.
Yeah, I think it is that one. So yeah, that era of Sigs for Squier, and again, they knew. It's so funny that they're way more expensive second hand than they were new now, because they're so cool. But like new, you could probably pick them up for like 300 quid, 350 quid, sub 400 quid for sure. And now if you find one of those Mikey Way ones, a lot of the time they're like 800 quid. Because they're so cool and so rare. Yeah. And yeah, I totally agree with you. But I will say that I think Sig gear falls into two things. There's the accessibility side of things, which I absolutely commend and think that people should be able to get an affordable, cool way of getting excited by an instrument, especially if you're a young person, you see a band that inspires you and you want to look like that guy, or, play like that guy or get that sound. And, you can afford 300 or 400 quid for Christmas, or if you save up your pocket money or whatever, that is awesome. But I think there's another side to Sigs, which I think we'll probably get onto later, which is you are like a working musician, or you're like a gigging musician, or you're a big session guy, and you need something specifically designed to cater to the sonic requirements of your projects. And I think sometimes that's where that element goes into the other side of things, where you're building something for a very specific purpose. And I think that's when the Sigs become more expensive, because you're going outside the normal remit of, the tooling is different because you're having to change pickup placement, or you're adding a ton of onboard electronics, or you've completely changed the neck profile to be your perfect neck profile because you're doing 200 gigs a year. Or you're adding carbon rods because you're touring from, say, India to Alaska, and the humidity and temperature changes would just ruin like a normal neck. So I think there's two elements to Sig stuff. And I think, again, I really respect and admire people who can do that affordable thing. But I also think there's an element of, you have, if you're given that opportunity, you should be able to tailor something to your exact spec, unless your exact spec is actually you just love P basses and want to put a cool finish on it, which is absolutely valid as well. But yeah, I think it's an interesting convo.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure we'll cover it in a full question on this podcast. I think there's so much to be said, and you make such a valid point, I think, because actually, going back to Pete Wentz, he ain't using that signature Squier on tour anymore, or he might have done for a little bit, or not the actual production model. He's got his own modded version,
Yeah, or he's got a custom shop.
Yeah. So it's like a budget version of it. So I think there's definitely different angles. And it's not to say that any, you're wrong for making an expensive one. It comes under what the artist wants to get out of it at the end of the day.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. But then that's some exciting news, I think, for a week that I thought was going to be not very news heavy. It's pretty news heavy. I liked it. Let's move on to our second question.
Question 2. Can you play a short scale as your main bass? Now,
no.
I can't answer this because I've never played a short scale bass ever in my entire life. Johnny, Nope, never played one.
You played my Squier Bass 6
no, I didn't.
3 or 4 weeks ago.
No, I didn't. Didn't touch it.
La 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 la.
No, seriously.
And he loved it.
I didn't play it.
Did you not?
No.
I thought he did.
I never got round to it. Because everyone else in the room was like, oh, it's got 6 strings, but it's like a bass.
Oh, what plot twist. Well done. I've absolutely lied to everyone and he didn't play it. So sorry, everyone.
But also, no, as you know, Matt, I did spend all the afternoon going, this Dingwall is amazing.
Yes, that did happen. And that's the opposite of a short scale because it's super long scale.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's about 4 miles longer than short scale. Right, well...
some might say you're compensating.
And you would be absolutely correct. I've never played a short scale bass. Johnny, you have played a short scale bass. Have you ever gigged with a short scale bass?
I've never gigged with a short scale bass. So I feel a bit underqualified to say if you could, because I mean, of course you could. Like, there's nothing to say. There's no rules in any of this. At the end of the day, you could absolutely, have that as your main bass because it's got a certain sound to it and feel. And if that is up your alley, then that is going to be what you use. I guess what this question is more kind of aimed at is like if you're using multiple different basses, maybe are you going to use that as your main one or the others? For me, I personally prefer a long scale overall because I tend to A, hit it quite hard, and B, hit it quite hard. So I like to have that slightly bigger tension, and I just, overall, that's where I'm at home in that feel. And the songs and genres I'm playing don't often call for a short scale, I don't think. So for me, yes, you can, but I don't. What are you thinking, Matt?
Well, so this is a really interesting question for me, because again, like you, I often have preferred long scales, but I have gigged a lot of short scales as well. So everything from kind of like hollow body Epiphones, they're kind of artcore, big jazz body type looking things. I've had 2 Music Master basses, like vintage Music Masters. I've had a 1966 Fender Mustang as well. And obviously, going back to what we were talking about earlier, my new Voronsaku is a short scale 5. So I think you absolutely can gig a short scale as your main bass. I would say they do have some kind of like tonal characteristics which make them slightly different and either better or worse for certain things. But again, going back to a preamp pedal, you can tweak a lot of these characteristics almost out and have it just as kind of like a, any signal will do almost vibe. So I find that the fundamental note of a short scale is much bassier than something like a 34-inch, and I find that the treble response usually is a bit it decays quicker because there's less string tension. So actually what that means is you get a less bright treble. It like warms up the treble strings a little bit. So actually overall I find that they sound a little bit more balanced. You don't get that kind of like slightly thin sounding G sometimes. You can go into that D territory where they kind of don't sound as full as the bottom end. So I think from a short scale perspective, you get a bit more balance in terms of, I guess dynamics across all of these strings when they're open, especially. From a comfort point of view, I think they're probably easier for people with smaller hands to play. I've actually got quite big hands, but I get a lot of wrist issues. So I find that if I'm playing something like a 35-inch, bizarrely, I don't get this on like Dingwalls and stuff like that, but on a 35-inch, I start to get, or I can get some like wrist pain. So I think that if you've got any kind of like RSI or arthritis or anything like that, tendonitis, short scale can help. And I think if you're a guitar player moving over to bass, or you're kind of younger, like a, you know, say young teenager or a kid, short scales again just help you to navigate the fretboard a little bit easier. I think that if you are hoping to use a short scale as your kind of main squeeze, have a little think about the pickup configuration, because for me it makes a massive difference with short scales. Even though the space generally between the pickups is less, because you've got so much less string tension and scale, for me they have a lot to play in terms of your overall kind of like sonic palette you've got available. So one of my favorite ones is the new Mustang range that have a Piano J, because I think at a short scale that works super killer. I think the Jazz Bridge on like a, say something like a Mustang now, gives you almost all of that jazz tone. You still get a very bright kind of, you know, push back towards a bridge sound, and if you turn the tone off, you still get quite like a scooped sound, which is like really good for like fast lines and stuff, especially if you've got like flat wounds on it. And I think that, you know, I don't see a single problem unless you're playing. This is where it gets controversial, because I think if you're playing metal, short scales might not necessarily be the one. But I am going to caveat that with the bass I've just had built for me is a short scale 5 that I drop tune, and it sounds absolutely immense. So it's all to do with the setup and the configuration. If you're going custom built, you can basically build any of the foibles out of a short scale and just have this super cool, super reliable kind of, you know, bass that you can throw around a bit. And that's one of the things I do like about short scales. On stage, they're just a bit easier to navigate, that you can really kind of like throw them around and have like a, you know, if you're someone who's quite movement heavy on stage, you throw your basses around a bit, short scales are just like ones that, you know, you can really kind of like muscle around, and generally the bodies are smaller as well, so they're a bit lighter, better on the back if you've got a long gig. The only annoying thing is strings. It can be difficult to source good strings. Although a little hack is if you can use long scale strings on a short scale, you just have to pinch them first and then cut them down to size so that the cord doesn't slip. But I actually use long scale strings on mine. So yeah, all about short scales. Definitely think you could use one for every gig.
That was like, Matt, we should have you each week for Matt's top tips corner or something. It's like there's so much in there for people to take on, I think.
Like a podcast weatherman. On your left, you'll see short scale basses are coming in quite heavy in the east.
It's the Parker Pocket, we'll call it.
Love it.
Doing a little like 70s game show theme tune.
And tonight
Parker's Pocket.
Love it.
Incredible. With short scales, I definitely think that for me they give you like a different vibe. Like I play differently on a short scale than I would on a long scale, and just the kind of things, not just from the playability, from the sound as well. Like I absolutely love picking up that short scale just off the wall, and that's my noodle machine now. You know, that is the go-to for that. And sometimes you need that in your life. Sometimes you need to something that's just like, oh, I'm just going to pick this up 5 minutes. Oh, and it's just so much fun to. I don't know what it is. It's the lessened. Is that the right word? The strings aren't so tight, like, you know. So that lessened string tension. That's what I'm looking for. Got my brain. After having that hot sauce the last week, it's just like scrambled my mind, I think. It's just so much easier to pick up and play on a whim, I think. Or even if you're having a lazy day and you just want to jam on it. I absolutely love it, and it's just a creativity machine for me now. So yeah,
I think
big fan of short scales.
I think that's it. Like physically, they're less demanding often, so you can just pick them up and kind of just noodle away. And like, you know, say you've got something that's like quite an intensive or like, you know, note heavy line. Often I'll pick up a short scale and learn it on a short scale, and then once I've got the notes under my fingers, I'll move it over to a long scale. Just like if I need that kind of, you know, additional string tension or a bit of clank or something like that. But I tend to find that as well, because they sonically are different, and again I find that they're more bassy, they make me play with like a lot more space, because they decay. The note decays a lot quicker, so you can like really play with like the backbeat a little bit, like, you know, in terms you're not getting like additional overtones ringing out all the time. I think, is it like you get a fifth above when you listen to an overtone of like a string, you get like a fifth above, I think, which is like kind of half of the note that you hear. But with the short scales, you don't get as much of that. I think that's the interval, I can't really remember, but you get less of that, which means that actually the note decays a lot quicker, and what you're hearing more of is like actually like, you know, the fundamental, which is like, you know, your open E or whatever, your A on the fifth or something like that. So that for me then gives you that kind of like breathing room in between notes. And I think if you've got like a, you know, quite like a staccato touch where it's like very short notes, you can get a really funky sound out of a short scale.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It's like that staccato playing, it really draws out of you naturally.
Yeah, 100%.
And you're right, it's because of that faster decay. It therefore sounds better when you're doing more of those kind of those smaller, you know, notes and not like long drawn out bits.
100%.
Nice. Well, Chris, when you get a short scale?
I mean, as a man who's 5'10" on a good day, I probably should try one. But yeah, I mean, there's no prejudice apart from towards the bass six. But apart from that, I don't even know. It sounds good. Why do I slag it off? Every time I've heard one, I've gone, this is really good. I've just never tried one. Genuinely, there's never been one at a gig. I've never been in a music shop where I've seen one and gone, you know what, I will give it a go. I think it's just coincidence, to be honest. I mean, I hear nothing but good things. And I've heard yours, Matt. I've heard yours, Johnny. And they all sound good. So, don't know.
I've had exactly the same with Warwick basses, where people are like, "What? You've never played one?" I'm just like,
"Yeah,
never had the
Neither
chance." I don't know why. Same with Rickenbackers. And Matt, you've had a lot. I've never played one.
Oh, but is incredible.
But Johnny, you try basses out so much more than I do. Like I never try basses. Like genuinely, like I think it's because if I try one I really like, I'll end up buying it. Like when I met up with Matt and I got to play the NG2, I must have spent the rest of the week on eBay going, well, there's one in Cardiff for £1,000. And there's one in
Nissan Micra.
I should have got a finder's fee for that, because I showed a couple of people who I knew were looking for one, and like it sold in like an hour because I sent it to someone and they went and bought it.
Because I went back, I went back looking for it, thinking, because I've got some things coming up where sort of maybe extended scale might be a good idea, and I also don't own a 5-string, like in any way. I don't own one, so I thought, well, you don't have a 5-string. And you also don't have anything that's like kind of extended scale gent machine. But no, just never bothered. And then it was gone, obviously.
Was going to at that price though.
Oh, £1,000, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're listening,
definitely... yeah, if you're listening, Dingwall, please send us all NGs. Yeah, I've had so many Dingwalls, as you know, and they're just such killer. I mean, that B is
was ridiculous.
It was so good.
Like I pick really hard, and it was just amazing having that NG2 detuned in A, and just absolutely caning it. And the fact that normally a note tuned like that will go a little bit sharp, a little bit flat, and then it will come up. But you'll hear that little hump as it comes up. That Dingwall was literally like, "Nah, what else you got? Take me down to F sharp, you son of a gun. You won't stop me."
You can tune them down to F sharp on stock strings. Like, that's how good the tension is. It's
mental.
Just like you can get crazy lows on like a 130. It's nuts. Or
there's a reason why they're so popular. Like a little part of me wanted to be like, don't believe the hype. But then when I tried it, I was like, yeah, I can see why everybody wants one of these now. This is quite good.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, short scales.
Can we segue back to the bass 6 really quickly? Because
No.
For anyone who's listening, no, just straight up. No. All right. Well, that was the question too.
Go on, then.
I am team bass 6 because I feel like often the bass 6 is maligned by people online who don't use it in a way which is kind of consummate with bass players. So a lot of the time you hear it played with either strangle switch on, which is like the bass cut, and it's been played by guitar players through a guitar rig. And it sounds like a very weird baritone guitar, which has its place and is very cool. But if you play it through a bass rig and you play it like a bass and you're a bass player and you have it all set up how you want it, you've got the strangle switch off and you've got the neck and the middle pickup on with a bit of tone rolled off, it gives you some of the best bass sounds I think I've ever heard. Certainly through front of house. Like I will take my bass 6 to function gigs as the only bass, and I will do a 2-hour function session with just the bass 6, and I've never had a complaint.
Damn,
it's killer. And they're so much fun. And it's really funny watching sound guys try and figure out what's coming through, like signal wise, because they're looking at you playing what looks like a jag. And then they're like, how is this thing sounding an octave lower than the next guy's guitar? And they're so much fun. And they're relatively inexpensive. And I think for a bass player who's looking for a really versatile studio tool, or a guitar player who wants to do the occasional bit of bass tracking, they're just so good because, again, strangle switch, you can play a lead line or do some melody stuff. And then you can go and track your bass 5 seconds later on the same guitar by just flicking one switch. And again, I think from a studio tool and as just a way of opening up a bit of creativity, as a bassist, giving you more sonic options and giving you more ability to play chords and things like that, they're just killer. And I don't know why. I understand why they don't get the praise that they deserve, because they don't look like a bass. They look like a guitar. If you're playing it through a guitar rig, they don't really sound like a bass a lot of the time. And I think people see that and go, this is a gimmick. When actually, if you play it, go and play one through a bass rig and your mind will be changed, I promise. So anyway, yeah, that's my kind of short love story to the bass 6, and I hope more people if you need a good option or good reason to go and check out the bass 6, there's a bass player in America, a lady named Julie Slick, and she plays bass 6s as well as normal basses, and she's got an Eventide, I think it's an H9 or something like that, pedal. And she does some mind-blowing stuff with bass 6s. And I heard her 5 years ago, and I was like, right, one day I'm getting a bass 6 because that's killer. So anyway, that's enough of me. I'm not going to talk any more about bass 6s, but I'm there to fly the flag.
I feel like I'm the moderator in the middle, holding you two back from each other, because I'm literally Switzerland in this. I'm like, yeah. No,
I made one
cool.
joke.
I've had one and it was cool.
I made one comment about how I thought it was silly, and I even heard one. I heard one in the room and even said that sounds amazing, because it does sound really good. Like when Matt was playing his, and you had the pickups configured like a bass would, and we were playing it into a bass amp. I was like, yeah, it sounds literally just like a bass. And I feel like the internet has gone, well, Chris doesn't like them, and then now I can't escape it.
And now he doesn't like short scales either, so this guy.
Oh, God. It's like clickbait title, like, short scale players hate him. Learn these
Next
five,
he's gonna say,
learn these 5 top tips to piss off Chris Horrocks.
He's going to be like, next he's like, yeah, 4 strings is too much. Jack only needed 1 string.
I mean, famously, oh shit, why can't I remember his name? Oh, sorry. No, Tony Levin. Tony Levin has that famous picture on the Bass
Danny
Guitar
Higgins.
magazine. Yeah, Danny Higgins. Yeah, Stoke-on-Trent's answer to Tony Levin has that picture.
A Charvel user as well.
Oh, a man of culture, I see. He'll be listening to this. He'll be fuming now.
Yeah.
Hi, Danny. Love you.
We love you.
Bye,
Hi, Danny.
Anyway, and it's Tony Levin with a 3-string Music Man, because at the time that was when 6-string basses sort of first appeared. Not like short scale 6-string, like the actual proper, full scale ones. And he was like trolling everyone, going, "Well, they need 3 strings, maybe 2."
Hey, I'm all for 1. Why not?
Why not? Eh? Why not
all for
1?
1 and 1 for all. That's going to be my Squire signature that will come out.
we do need to
inspire everybody.
We do need to do a signature bass episode, to be fair.
Yeah.
I've planned mine. I've got it ready and banked in the ready to go.
Well, speaking of, I guess, kind of signature basses, let's move on to our next segment, shall we? So this next segment, we've decided to kind of combine them together. As you know, we would normally do listen to a tone that someone's brought along, and our lovely guest Matt Parker has done just that. But we're also going to we're going to combine this with the big bass debate this week as we talk about custom basses. because I want to ask the question, what is it like to order a custom bass? What's the process? How do you even choose the specs or the brand? How does this all come about from conception to completion? So, Matt, I wonder if you can start us off by, how did this creation come about, and what is the creation?
Yeah, sure. So, for those of you who don't know, I recently it arrived at my door, the Vorta & Saku MP Shorty 5. So obviously MP Matt Parker. It's a short scale 5-string. It's an offset body, and it's got 2 Thunderbird pickups in the middle and the bridge position. Hipshot hardware throughout, apart from the control plate, which is made by Saku, which is super cool. And then it's kind of been a bit of a journey, really. So we were chatting on Instagram anyway, and then he was saying that he was potentially going to come and do the guitar show in Birmingham in February, and he was like, I'd like you to play it for us, if can I make you a demo bass? And I was like, yes, absolutely, I'd wanted one for ages anyway. So we kind of got talking through that, and I spec'd a build over a couple of months with him. So it's quite unique in terms of the features you wouldn't usually see in basses, certainly over here. We tried to keep it with kind of like finished woods, locally sourced. So it's not stuff like alder and ash. It's actually it's a spruce body. So kind of like what Hofners are made of, or any of the Stradivarius violins. It's kind of, if you didn't know, you'd basically think it was probably pine. It's very light. It balances really well. Very, very resonant. Really nice grain structure on it. It takes nitro really well, which is what the finish is. And then it's got a birch neck, one piece, I played a birch neck before actually, and they're killer. Again, quite resonant and very lightweight. It's got a compound profile as well as a compound radius. So it's a soft V at the first 5 frets, and it graduates into a fat C. So it's actually 2 different shapes, the neck, which is killer. Wow. And that was kind of born around, I think I mentioned it earlier, I get some like wrist pain sometimes, and I really like soft Vs on like 50 strats and stuff like that. So, and I like a really fat neck front to back. And then it's got 46.5mm nut width. It's got a compound fretboard with a very slight compound, so I think it's 9 to 10 inch. Stainless frets, nitro satin finish on the neck, a 3 finish nitro body, so it's clear nitro, and then Chevrolet blue over that, and then it has comp stripes like taped off essentially, and then it was finished in a magnolia white, which is kind of like an off vintage looking white, and then it's a light relic. So it's got like finish checking and a couple of little bits where you can see the blue coming through and stuff like that. But generally, no massive dings and stuff like that. And then just kind of Shayla strap locks and stuff like that. I said the bridge tuners and string trio are Hipshot. And then the pickups are TB5s, hand wound and handmade by Saku as well. So I think he makes the casings and everything for it, as far as I know. And yeah, it kind of just became a bit of a labour of love, really. I had very specific things in mind when I spec'd it. So I've got a band called Whalebone with Joss Allen on guitar, and it's like a doom project. So kind of contrary to what you'd expect from a metal bass, I wanted it short scale to take some of the treble out. I didn't want it to clank. I wanted it to be all bottom end, all kind of low to mid, if that makes sense. I didn't want really tons of treble coming out of it, because a lot of that stuff is very, we tune to B flat standard, so like half a step down, but some of our stuff does go down as low as drop F, which I unison tune for. The bit you're going to hear later on is in A standard, so again half a step down again from what we normally play in, but because of that, and because I'd had a 66 Mustang with middle position P pickups and jazz bridge, it had been modded. I loved that pickup configuration, and on a short scale it gives you a really cool it's difficult to say, but basically in the middle you kind of get that P bassy sound that you'd expect, but obviously having something back near the bridge you can also kind of add that kind of like honk in that you would get from a jazz. But with the TB5 Thunderbird style pickups, they're intrinsically darker anyway, so for metal, you get tons and tons of low end and again low mid, but you don't get as much clank that you would get on maybe something like, say, a Dingwall, where you get a lot of that kind of like treblier, like upper mid type thing going on. And that was what I wanted to avoid. Having had tons of Dingwalls, which are again great, I wanted the absolute opposite of that. So just because that wasn't the sound I wanted for this project. So I spec'd it very much with whalebone in mind. That being said, because the pickups are darker and you're, again, going back to that short scale staccato type playing, it's really cool for like neo soul and like funk stuff as well. So that was kind of the logic behind speccing it that way, really. It's awesome. Saku's just a one guy workshop, so from start to finish he literally showed me a picture of some blocks of wood, and then the next day showed me blocks of wood kind of cut into squares with a tracing of a base on it. And then from there we kind of just saw more and more of it. Like, we got to pick up, again, throughout the build process, I got to pick all of the specs, including the fret wire size. So I got to pick the depth of the neck front to back, the type of fret material and how big the fret wire was, the nut width, what hardware we were going to do, what pickups, where the pickups were. So that leads me on to what I was going to say about custom building. So depending on who you go with, your custom experience can be very different. So there's like levels of custom build. I've had loads and loads of custom bases built, and some have been to this extent where, again, I get to pick where the pickup placement is, or how deep the neck is, or what frets are going to go on it. And some, like, for example, we say like Sandberg or Dingwall or something like that, is you have kind of list models, and you can kind of pick some of the electronics in it, or you can pick the finish, you can pick maybe the neck wood, but stuff like fret sizing, nut width, neck depth, all of that is set in stone for you. You cannot change it. So you're still ordering a custom base and you'll get a great product, but you don't quite go down the rabbit hole as much as if you're going with kind of like a smaller builder or someone who's kind of more open to building you a base to the exact specs you want, essentially. Because, you know, there's economies of scale. If you're one person doing it, you can spend time doing it. Whereas if you've got a production line of, say, you need to make 20 bases a day, you can't go down that into that amount of depth with each person. So I think another thing is that because it was one person, I got like really regular updates, again, because they could give me the time, because they were working on, say, you know, I don't know, 3 or 4 bases probably at a time. Whereas, you know, they're not trying to churn over 20 a day or, you know, 15 a day or 10 or whatever it is. So certainly working with Saku was a great experience and super informative. We bounced ideas off each other a lot. I didn't want this to be me dictating every bit of spec. He's a master luthier. He's Finland's youngest master luthier. Wow. You know, he's got a ton of knowledge about woods, about kind of, you know, configurations and stuff like that, and we bounced a lot of ideas off each other. So stuff that he brought to the table, for example, I said to him that I'm really into old race cars, so he's made the pickup selector like an old racing ignition switch. So whilst it's actually neck, middle and bridge, it's got like a cool on-off embossed on the pickup selector, which looks incredible. And like he brought that on. He was like, how do you want the body contours? And from a stripped back, I wanted it to be as functional as possible, but no added jazz, essentially. So I said, just give me a tummy cut and give me a slab body, because I don't want any additional contouring. I just want it to be lean, mean, stripped back, ready to go kind of thing. And he was like, well, I can do an absolute hard edge slab body, but if you prefer, I can just make it a bit comfier by rolling the edges. So the body is a slab, but it's actually got rolled edges, almost like, you know, how they roll fretboards.
Yeah.
So he brought that to the table. Some of the stuff that I brought was the pickup placement, because originally we were going to do neck and bridge, and then I said, oh, can we see it with bridge and middle and bridge, just have a look at it and see how it is. We decided to go with that. The reverse headstock was kind of like, we've both been thinking that, because I wanted a bit of additional length for that low B, because obviously it was going to be short scale. And one of the things that worked out really well was actually getting that additional string length on there, because it means that I can drop down into A. I mean, you guys have heard it already, but that low B for a short scale, like, it defies physics. It's got so much tension. And then again, one of the things was, I said to bring up some more tension for a short scale flat wounds, because obviously compared to rounds, they've just got so much more tension.
Yeah.
And again, it just helps me get a bit more of that darker tone. I'm trying to eliminate clank for this one. So from a kind of a perspective of it working for what I need, it's just hit everything out of the bag. So yeah, it's been like a really cool experience with Saku. You know, lovely guy to work with, incredibly generous with his time. Attention to detail is like something from the custom shop. I've played Fender custom shop stuff and been disappointed, and I've played 7K bases from high-end manufacturers and been disappointed, and I've played some which have been incredible, but this was just like, every expectation that I had in my head, I was worried when I unboxed it, because I was like, oh my god, is it going to live up to my expectation? And when I unboxed it, I was just like, this is like where I should be. It's so comfortable to play for me, obviously, because I spec'd it, so you would hope that it would work. But from a wood perspective, again, Saku is like, he's like, what kind of woods do you like for a build? And I have spec'd enough builds that I know that I like swamp ash for bodies and stuff like that, because it's lightweight, it's very vibrant and quite resonant. So it's like, a nice wood to have a body made of for long gigging, and certainly from the tonal perspective. And he was like, the woods that I've got, we were trying to keep it finished woods, so I wasn't going to do swamp ash, but he was like, here's some of the woods that I have that are kind of similar to swamp ash and will give you the same characteristics. Originally we were going to go pine, ended up going with spruce. Again, super resonant. It's one of those bodies you can knock on and you hear it ring. It's just really
interesting.
Cool.
It's interesting though, because as well, I feel like you have got a good product out of this, not just because you're working with someone who definitely sounds like a fantastic builder. You have real world experience of working with, you said you've had multiple custom builds made for you. You've played so many basses, Matt. You need to go to therapy. But you've got that knowledge. And I was listening to you talking about those different things, like, pickup configurations, the reverse headstock for the additional scale length, the support for the scale length. These are things that wouldn't even cross my mind, because I haven't experienced those. Just like, for example, it's like let's pretend you've tried 15 stock bases and gone, well, I like this from this, I like this from this, I like this from this. Would these three things work together? No, but this one could. You've got that experience of having an instrument in your hands and messing around with various elements, whereas Johnny probably has a lot more experience of this than me, whereas I only really know, I've probably only ever stuck about 10 basses in my hand, ever. Like, I don't play a lot of... If we're talking about guitars, I could do this all day, every day, but bass has very much been a thing for me.
Get out.
Where, I know. Disgusting! Whereas bass for me has been something where it's like, the first thing that got put in front of me was a jazz bass, and I went, hey, this sounds all right. And then I stuck with it for 4 years and never tried anything else. So it's... I know you were saying, obviously... What was the guy's name again?
Saku Viori.
Well, he's obviously made you an amazing product, and there's zero doubt in my mind that this guy really knows what he's talking about. But I feel like your real world experience of dealing with lots of different other products is definitely... You're able to say what you wanted. I don't think I would be able to do that. I'm not entirely confident that, I have a preference towards a maple neck, but I can't really tell you why. And then I'm used to things that are more like ash-based bodies. But if someone said to me, oh, well, like Babinga and Panga Panga and those other neck bodies, I got to be honest, I'm not entirely sure I would be able to tell the difference.
Well, even like you said, even the fret wiring and the
exactly,
thickness of
yes.
this and that and tiny little things that I'd be like, I ain't got a clue. And that's where that knowledge from that luthier comes in super handy, because then, you, like you say, it can be really collaborative, and they can advise you on, on based on what your likes are. They spec it out on that, as well as not just the very fine details that you might not know about. Because I bet, well, I don't know, are most of the people that are getting custom basses drilling down to every single detail? I mean, did you find that was something that you really enjoyed about this one compared to other ones that you've done, Matt?
Yeah, 100%. And I think some of that as well is that, so this isn't the first custom bass I've built. So I was already kind of going back to previous conversations I've had, and and even just there's been times that I've spec'd something and actually been like, actually it wasn't kind of how I wanted it. And this goes back again. There's stages of this, but the first stage is, it depends on the level of custom you're going. So again, if you ordered say a Fender custom shop or a Dingwall custom or a Sandberg or something like that, you've kind of got a template of options. So they take a lot of the choice, not away from you, but they give you the choices that you can make. So you have, if it's a 5-string, it's going to have X nut width. So that's already taken out of your control. The fretboards that they offer are maybe going to be, say, something like Wenge, Ebony, and Maple. So you pick between 3 words. If you've only ever played Maple, there's a good chance you probably just stick with Maple. If you want like a really nice kind of almost like slightly brighter hardwood, I would go for Ebony. Certainly for a fretless, love Ebony on a fretless. You get that really nice like moire without having a coated board. Or if you want a slightly warmer response, you go for something like Rosewood, or in another instance like Wenge. Then bodywoods. Again, this is going back to something that you might have played. So if you've played, say, I don't know, a P bass, you might go for like an alder body, unless you've played an ash P. But generally, I think P is typically alder. So if you like that kind of body weight, you probably kind of, and you like the slightly, I guess, warmer body response of alder, then you probably go into that. And again, you're probably only going to get options of either like alder, ash, or maybe like basswood or something like that. If you're going for like there's different variants of basswood. It can be the cheapest stuff, or it can be super expensive because it's very
in our world we call it basswood.
Basswood. Yeah, exactly. But so you'll be like, typically I think a lot of the people who are spending this kind of money on basses already have a fairly good idea of things that they like and dislike anyway. And often, again, going back to this kind of, if you're working with a bigger company's custom shop, you have options which you like. So you've probably already played one of the products and gone, yeah, I like the 5-string version of this. The C neck profile works for me. I'm just going to put these pickups in it.
What was your involvement with the company before? Did you come across them before and just really liked them and thought, yeah, this is the one?
Yeah, so I always love small builders anyway, because I feel like they can afford to put more attention into things, which, even if you've got a company where the founder still works for them, often their job now is very admin based, or, like promotional stuff. It's not always, it's very rare, I think, that a lot of them are in the shop, chiseling away at something. Maybe like Federa and stuff like that, where like Vinny's still grafting away and stuff like that, or Joey. But, typically you tend to find that someone starts a company, it gets better and better and better. And then unfortunately, they don't have as much of a hands-on involvement anymore.
Yeah, they move into more of a CEO kind of
CEO
role.
role. Exactly.
Like,
do you mean Leo,
personality
Leo
role.
Fender?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly.
But Jim Marshall isn't still sat there like screwing in all the valves himself.
What?
Spoiler alert, Jim unfortunately is no longer with us.
R.I.P. Jim. That's not the Christmas news I wanted to hear.
Christmas is ruined.
Christmas is bloody ruined. 2022 for you. No, but yeah, as I said, you get to this point where you have like specs set in stone for you. So you know that you like one of their offerings and you pick things based on that. So going back to what how I kind of got involved with Saku, I really like their stuff on his stuff on Instagram and stuff like that online. Basically, about a year, 18 months ago, he did Ian Martin Allison's signature bass. If you've seen it, obviously Johnny's nodding for those who can't see it.
Yeah,
right.
so I literally looked it up a minute ago because I was like, I've heard this name before.
Matt,
and I was like, yes.
Yeah, Matt, before you sent me the first pictures of the bass, I thought, I've seen that name somewhere, and I couldn't think about it where. But now, yes, of course, yeah, Ian has one.
Is that like off sagey green, kind of bluish green? Like
it's kind of like a Pelham blue type vibe,
yes.
And then I think it's multicolored, so there's like different finishes under it. So as it wears, it'll show off different finishes, which I think is cool because it's going to like tell a story of Ian's ownership. Massive shout out to Ian, by the way, huge ambassador for like the bass community. Lovely guy. Often I've had like, when I was like a new dad and stuff, I was having like a meltdown and I was like, Ian, you're a bass dad. Like, you don't know me at all, but can you just like hold my hand for a minute? And he was like, you'll be fine. Stop talking to me.
That's really nice. But that's so
know.
true. Like, that's so true. Like what you said about, like it's got like a story to tell. And I think, like you said about the woods being local as well, that kind of comes into it as well, and it kind of brings this kind of soul element to the bass.
100%. And the wood of the body of mine is almost the same age as me. It's like born in the same. It's like born. It was like harvested in the same kind of like era of me being born. So like it's
1964.
Yeah, 1969, baby.
Wow.
2019.
I saw a meme about that. It was like people who were born in 1999 are 42 years old. Just let that sink in.
I love it. You know, it's really harrowing for me. So I'm 30, and I hired like my first staff member at my job like a couple of weeks ago, and she's 25, and even though there's only 5 years in it, like we're like she's got such a different,
so much older. Yeah,
it's the first time I've ever felt old, because like I did a photo shoot a couple of like a week ago for someone, and someone thought I was 27. I was like, yeah, I'll take that. And then but culturally, like I just have such a different like reference point. Me and my manager have like reference points of like stuff like, you know, like Gladiators being on TV and stuff, like very hazy memories. But like Gladiators and like stuff like Pokemon first series and stuff like that. And we're always like,
on TV.
Pokemon, blah, blah. Yeah, literally. And we have all these references, and then I'm like, you weren't alive for any of that happening. You know what I mean? And so like and like just the sources we use at work, like I'm all over Reddit and like still like read blogs about things. And like she's just like, no, TikTok, and I'm like, oh, okay. So like it's just it's so interesting.
I can top that. So I've gigged with people who weren't alive when the first Shrek movie came out.
There's people who have kids. There's people who've had kids that weren't alive when the first Shrek movie was out, which blows my mind.
I can tell you comfortably right now, one of the very first times I went, wait, I am actually like old now at the grand old age of 28. I have lower back pain. That's actually like a genetic injury. And I'm like,
that just gets worse and worse.
Yep. And I'm like, I've changed my entire gym routine to like kind of focus on lower back strength. And I'm like, Christ, I'm 28. I swear last week I was throwing up in Wetherspoons. Like, what is going on here?
You were at that gig.
I was correct. For all those listening, I'm a very professional bass player. I do not need
please hire him
after gigs. Please hire me. I need the money. Thank you.
When you say 5 and drive earlier, Chris.
No.
Joking.
I only tell people they can do 5 and drive. I do not do 5 and drive.
No, definitely no one doing drive. It's very stupid.
Very stupid.
Especially not around Christmas. Don't be a dum and ruin someone's Christmas. Anyway,
exactly.
Yeah. So going back to Ian's bass, I saw that, and that's kind of what got me interested in the company. And so I started, like, I followed Saku. You know, I was like, we were just chatting back and forth about his bass builds and stuff like that. And it just really organically kind of grew from there. And again, he was going to come to the UK and do a guitar show. I was like, you know, should we do like a demo bass and you can come and do the show kind of thing? So that's kind of where it started. And yeah, like I said, it just evolved into us doing the first five string short scale he's ever done. We took some learnings, obviously, as said, and you know, I've spec'd a load of basses. He's built a load of basses. So between us, I think we've made a really cool thing, to be honest. I definitely, yeah, I don't see many short scale 5s. I've seen a few recently. They seem to be.
I've seen a Spectre. They did one recently, I think.
Spectre's done one.
Really?
Viv Wilcox basses. He's just done one for Tim Lefebvre, I think, and one of his Malarkey 5s. I think it's got dog ear P90s in it in the neck and middle, so it looks super cool. I think it's like a red cherry. It looks very much kind of like, almost like an SG bass, different body shape but same finish and like black hardware and stuff with the like neck and middle, so it looks very cool. So I think he's literally just taken delivery of that kind of that same week I got this, actually. So we're in competition. No, but
who's his best?
Yeah, no, mine's definitely best. But no, yeah, I think, you know, you guys will hear it. You guys have already heard it, but for anyone who hears it, the low string is just physics defying. I don't know how it sounds so clear for such a short scale, and you guys will have to. Johnny, I'll definitely have to pop up to you soon, and you can have a play on it.
Yes, please.
Yeah, just drive up to mine, Matt. No worries.
Are you paying for the petrol?
No.
Or the flight?
I mean, I drive to you, but I don't have a working car right now.
I've got a really small violin here.
I think I deserve a big violin for my car problems.
A big violin won't fit in your micro.
I'd big violin, tiny micro.
It's the perpetual struggle.
Absolutely.
Oh, well, so I suppose we better listen to this thing.
Nah.
Let's just leave them hoping. Let's take a listen to this incredible sounding bass now. Come on, man. I love it. Going from clean to dirty as well. I see what you mean about taking that high end out. And it's not a sound. When you were describing it, I was like, I don't know why I would want that for like metal or like heavier music. I don't know why I'd want that. Or like, I kind of like that, like the high end, but it works so well. It sounds so good in that mix.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think for me, it's certainly for Whalebone stuff, it's very kind of like wall of sound vibes, and Doom and Stoner stuff is very much that kind of genre anyway. Like it's like low, slow, baby, give me a ton of fuzz, or like, drive. Don't accent much of the top end. And to be honest, the guitars are so mid-rangey anyway that generally I kind of leave them to it. So yeah, it's that kind of thing of like a wall of sound. And also like with a lot of the metal stuff that I play anyway, I always scoop all the mids out of it anyway. Like I'm so like, scoop all your mids completely, max your filters so that you're not getting any of that, and all you're getting is like a nice clean low end and maybe sometimes a bit of treble on top. In this instance, I'm just trying to keep it like quite a clear low, which again is strange to say that you're going to go for a short scale, but because you get such a powerful fundamental and not as much of an overtone, it's almost like you get more of like a punch from it. It's like you get that low end and it kind of just, I would say alone, it's probably not a sound that you're going to be like, this is the best sound I've ever heard, but in a mix it sits so well against the mids of guitars that's kind of where I was going with that.
I mean, on its own is irrelevant, isn't it? I mean, for the nature of music that we play, as in as bass players, how we sound in the mix, for me, is more important than how we sound on our own, because I don't know about YouTube, it's very rare that I'm playing on my own. So the fact that it sits so well in the mix is a testament to the instrument, absolutely. I mean, I think it sounded really good, isolated anyway. But,
it does.
Yeah, I'm assuming that Whalebone track doesn't actually have a break in the middle of the riff where it's like, here's just the bass.
Yeah, it's like a really boring bass solo where I'll just play the riff but with nothing else. It absolutely does sound good. And to me, it's perfect. It's exactly what I wanted. But I think, if you're going to something like, say you isolated something like a Dingwall or something, it's going to sound very different to what you would expect, I think. And again, that's exactly what I wanted, and it does sound awesome on its own, but I do have to say I've obviously spec'd it for a very specific purpose, and it's not going to be everyone's purpose, but I think that from a mix perspective, which is again the most critical and important part of things, it just sits so well. So that's kind of, I'm super happy with it basically. And that Whalebone track is just off the new album, but for that clip you heard, I re-recorded it this morning. Like I took the bass out and like re-threw it back in with the new bass. And so like that's not like the mastered version or anything. That's literally I just threw the bass under the guitars and drums, and like it's had no mixing or mastering or anything like
that. Nice. Yeah, I totally know what you mean when it's when you got that really clear low end, because on that clean track it's, and I find that's a thing of short scale sometimes. You can get a little bit, they're a bit tubbier sounding almost, and not less defined, but I don't know. Like that one really defied that, I think, and I think just sounded awesome.
It's got such
really cool.
It's got such an interesting feel to it, because you look at it and obviously it's shorter and you think this is going to sound, again, tubby is a perfect word, it's going to sound like really muddy, almost like, you know, super bass heavy but with no definition. But
especially with those Thunderbirds
yeah,
as well.
It's so strange. Like I made it like almost to be, again, very dark sounding bass, but because of the pickup placement where it's in the middle and the bridge, it really kind of helps retain the clarity. And that's one of the reasons that I didn't opt to go for the neck, because I do think the neck on a short scale would probably have been too much. And it was, again, that reference point was that 66 Mustang I had with P's in the middle and then a Jazz in the bridge. That combo on a short scale just did something sonically that I was like, this is killer. And I gigged that bass loads. And from a mixing point of view, I always just found it really easy to sit in the mix, kind of regardless of the genre. So that was one of the things that informed this. And whilst, yeah, we wound the pickups to be slightly darker, again, because of their placement, it just helps retain some of that clarity. And I think as well, having a 127 flat wound for the B, it just helps keep that tension as well. So again, the string maybe is a little bit intrinsically darker or like darker mid, but because there's more tension, you're not like fretting out, and you've got enough, you know, I guess the strings vibrating efficiently enough that you're getting quite like a dynamic sound out of it still.
Yeah. Well, I absolutely, this has been such a good conversation, I think, because like previously I would have been like, 5-string short scale, are you mad? But like, this makes so much sense, and talking to you about this has been, I don't know about you, Chris, but super handy. And now I feel like I want a custom bass, which is something I never thought I'd ever try and say. So Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. I think everyone will agree that, you know, you brought a lot to today's episode, and not just in sounds, incredible sounds, but in knowledge as well, with your, you know, massive index of basses that you've played throughout the years, and all that experience coming into it was all accumulating to this podcast, I think, Matt.
This is literally what I've been working towards for my entire life. So thank you so much for finally making my dreams realised.
You're welcome.
This is the peak. Matt, one last time, sell yourself. Where can the people find you?
So on Instagram at Matt Parker Bass, TikTok again at Matt Parker Bass, or if you want to go on my website, mattparkerbass.com.
Damn, you're up, Chris. Where can the peeps find you?
It's just that guy on bass on Instagram and TikTok. Just stick to TikTok. No, don't stick to TikTok. That's not the point. Instagram. That's where I do most of my content. I post some stuff on YouTube as well. I might even try and film a YouTube video in the near future. I'm not too sure. I might do. You've heard it here first. Probably won't do it. We'll see what happens. But yeah. Just
this
that
is
guy
how
on
to
bass.
replace a cam belt on a Nissan Micra.
Here's
live
Here's 5 quick ways to bankrupt yourself in 3 easy steps.
Live reaction to Johnny Dibble's last unboxing. You won't believe what he said.
Johnny Dibble puts
Bass players
ghost
hate
pepper.
him.
Johnny Dibble puts ghost pepper up his bum and refuse.
That's one for the bank.
Wow. Sorry.
I don't know if I like this idea of creating a YouTube channel anymore, Chris.
I don't
Just
think
start
you
an
should.
OnlyFans.
Yeah, you know, I won't do it. I'll be like Craig Reynolds, but even more ADHD.
Let's start your own podcast. Come on.
Yeah, why not? No one wants that.
So, if you want to find little on me, if you're watching on YouTube, then you know what to do. To hit like, comment down below, and you know, hit that subscribe button. Maybe just do that for me. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Music, rate this podcast 5 stars. I assume it's all out of 5 stars. I might have been saying, yeah, rate us 5 stars, and it's out of like 20 or something, and then people have been giving us a real low rating. What I mean to say is, give us the top rating. Come on, give us a nice review to help us rank up on there. That'll be lovely stuff. If you want to follow me on Instagram and TikTok, it is at Johnny Dibble. Actually, No, I'm. If you didn't know, everyone, I'm really good at this podcast host stuff, and I just fuck up the.
How many subscribers do you have again on YouTube?
Not enough. So hit that button now. No, it's about 11,972, I think.
Oh,
something like that.
That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, okay, that's okay. I guess I've got 42.
Yeah, nice. Well, if you, I just went up 10. The last. That's
pretty good.
Yeah. So yeah. Well, if you start yours, then you can send them over to here as well.
I'll give you all 42 subscribers. Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, go and follow us on Instagram and TikTok. For Instagram, that is where you can submit your questions to this podcast. So make sure you're following and make sure that you look out for my stories each week where I post, where you can submit your questions for this. So yeah, once again, everybody, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.